It's always been possible to host static websites on Azure using things like blob storage and CDN in front of it. But now there's an entire static site hosting service. Let's mash on that. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Asp.Net Monsters. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the static web applications that have been launched in Azure maybe in the last 6 months.
Yeah,
I haven't had much of a chance to look at them before now. So
Yeah.
tell me everything, James.
Tell you everything. I can't tell you everything, but what I can tell you is this. So far, the experience has been really good. It's like one of those moments where you just kind of giggle because stuff works automatically and not magically. You can still see all the bits that bring everything together. The automation in pulling these sites together is actually really slick. Now, it comes with some limitations as always. For example, unless you have a functions-based component to drive the API, then you can't do runtime configuration options. And I think there's some security limitations that Dave's going to talk about as well. But for the most part, you set it up, you point it at a repo, it pulls your code, it just builds it and deploys a static site, and then you get some really interesting things as well. I'm going to show you one of the things. This is probably one of the things that made me giggle first, and here's how it happened. I noticed that there was a feature that said when you open a pull request, it's going to create a staging environment. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. Now, in the free tier, you're only going to get one staging environment. So it's just going to do the current pull request. I think it's the last one that you pushed out to the repo. But as soon as you push a pull request out, it actually spins up another environment for you and gets that running. There's some things that you're going to have to work through in terms of figuring out, okay, what API is this going to point at and whatnot. You want to make sure that it's not using the same tokens to access APIs that are in your live environment. You're going to want to make sure that the staging environment isn't pointing to a live database, things like that. But once you work past those things, and those are going to be probably some kind of environment config that you do in your build script, and you're going to configure your pull requests to use a particular version of your build script that targets those specific secrets to access your database and your APIs, etc. However, once you get past that hurdle, then this thing is kind of a thing of beauty. So I have a pull request out here right now on the repo, and that automatically generated an environment. So the first one, unfortunately, that went out, it failed. The build failed, and so I opened a pull request to fix that, and that's when I noticed this environment light up in staging, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So if you click on this is the environment that started up automatically for me based on that pull request. So this is just a view app. I can type David and Simon, or if you want to go reverse alphabetical order, you could do Simon and David. And there we go.
I like that one more.
That is a quality app.
Yeah, I know. You see how it puts the text right below. Like, come on.
Very
that's
cool.
Amazing.
So it generated a kind of random URL there for you for the pull request to represent that environment.
It did, absolutely, and that's tied into the zone that you're in. So I selected for my hosting for Central US, and then it just came up with this. This looks a lot like the Netlify kind of approach for some kind of GUID with a couple of nouns or whatever. So, I'm gonna update this pull request really quickly. So I'll just make sure I'm on the right. Okay, git add commit update for twice. Okay, and we can just now watch all the magic unfold. So up here, my pull request will be updated. It was updated just seconds ago. GitHub Actions plugs in, so you can see that it's still queuing both it queues up the deployment to the staging environment, and then the close pull request actually gets a second job that'll run. And when approved, when you close the pull request, it's actually going to do it. And in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to merge it. So now you can see this one's in progress, so I can spin in and actually watch the action run out. So this is my build and deploy job, and I want to get a little bit more real estate here, but unfortunately I have a very small monitor, so away it goes. It's copying. It basically senses that there's a pull request going in. It does all of your build script things that you've got, anything that's kind of deployed. All this app is just a stock view created. So I did absolutely nothing to modify the project at all. I just pointed the Azure static website or web app at my repo and gave it permissions, and it made the changes required to add the GitHub actions. So,
so it probably checked in like the configuration files for the build for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I imagine it did some limited introspection of what the story actually held, so we knew what to build.
Yeah. So the build happens through this thing called Oryx, which seems to be smart enough to understand kind of common things in. I suspect what it's doing is looking at your package JSON and looking for like an npm build kind of thing, but it kind of recognizes the common ones like a React app and a Vue app and things like that, and will call the right npm scripts to package up your application and pull the static assets out that you need to deploy for that version of the app.
Right. Very cool. So it does the build and deploy, and it actually starts pulling GitHub to make sure that, pulling your site deployment out in Azure to make sure everything's good. And you can see there now this is a closed pull request, so all my checks have passed. This has pushed out. Now where I'm going with this, I'm actually working with a coworker of mine, Christina. We're doing this browser stack test. So what we're trying to actually build out is she's actually helping write some tests in using Selenium, and we're going to have those tests run against the deployment after the pull request has been processed and deployed to staging. So we can see this is updated here in our pull request. And now if I fly back into my, I'll just close these guys down and go back into my, I'll just refresh this. My last update time was about right now, and I can click on browse, and now my update is there, so I can do Simon, Simone.
Yes, I'm sure that was an unintentional typo.
And David, there we go. So Simon and David. So those two are there now. So again, hands off, just everything happens on its own, very streamlined, and that made me giggle. I liked it. Okay, so drilling into a couple of things here, I'll pop back onto GitHub, Mr. James, browser stack tests. And we will go into the workflows, and then we have our YAML here. And I'm guessing that is probably
that's the name of your static web app.
Got that name app. So there, yeah, and it keeps building that in. So it used it to generate this this whole artifact and do the check-in, and then that's going to be what it's using for its various pieces. So and then we have the build and deploy job, which is run on pushes to a pull request as long as the pull request is not closed. And then we have another job in here saying if it's a pull request and the action is closed, then we run this. So this is going to be where we basically plug in our script to run Selenium, and we'll look at that on another episode. But basically, yeah, that's it. So it feels very magical, but you get all of the stuff to do.
It feels magical, but it's not really that magical. There's a few things that you can tell it here within this build script. You can tell it where your source code is. So in your case, it's just the root folder.
Right.
If you have an Azure Functions-based API, you tell it where that is inside your project. The default is API. And then if you need to, you tell it where the artifacts that you should deploy for the static site are located after doing the build. But it kind of figures that out, like I said, for the common scenarios, it figures it out automatically. So most of the time you don't even need to set that one. It's just those 3 settings. That's it.
Right on. So one of the things that you do have to, like the first thing that we ran into was that the app location, obviously you mentioned you're gonna have to set it or whatever. We had it in a source subdirectory. So we just, in order to simplify it and just have it work, that's why our first deployment failed, was because we were in a /source. So we're gonna have to update that in order to make that work. And there might be some small things, but because you've got the configuration in front of you, you can massage it how you need to. Okay, so Dave, you'd said that you'd run into. Oh, I guess let's watch the. We can merge this pull request because that's going to be fun too. We'll watch watch the thing finish out. So I'm just going to go ahead and merge the pull request, and that'll merge into our main line, and then we will see. I'll pop back in here and we should see this. It's now waiting for deployment, although that looks like the wrong one. So if I refresh it, we're probably going to see some action update here at some point. So, or it'll make a liar out of me. We'll see.
Oh, it'll work. I'm sure of it.
Okay, Dave, you'd found. Oh, I wanted to point out the configuration, much like your if you had a functions app or a standard ASP.NET app, like an ASP.NET Core app or whatever deployed, these application settings are going to be pumped in, but these only work for functions, not for your client-side stuff. And as with any client-side stuff, you're not going to want things like database connection strings out in your static files anyways, because those will be transmitted to the browser. So we keep the private secret things inside our API, and this is where the configuration would be set for those. So we've got functions, we've got environments, there's role management, which is what drives security, and then you can add custom domains in the paid tiers as well. And those are the things that I have looked at so far. David, go ahead on security.
Yeah, and I think just before jumping into that, probably worth mentioning that this is still in preview, so it's not a product that's like fully done, right? Static Web Apps is in preview. Some of the stuff they're still working on. One of those is the identity and role management side of things. So the scenario that I was looking at was there's an app that was built and done as a quick proof of concept over in AWS, and it's using Incognito for doing authentication and then hosting just a static site up in AWS storage and doing Lambdas for the API. So looking to move that over to Azure, and we could do that with all the individual pieces of storage and Azure Functions and Azure B2C for doing identity. And that would work fine, but I thought, let's take a look at Azure Static Web Apps and see if that would work. And the piece that doesn't quite work for that scenario yet is the identity management side. So it's relatively easy currently with the current implementation of Static Web Apps to like lock down your API and say that the functions that my front end talks to require you to be logged in or require you to be a member of a certain role. But there's no way to, it's pretty limited in the sense that like what I was looking for is something that would work the same way as Azure Functions do today, where I can go in there and turn on the Azure App Service identity piece and just say, my identity provider that I'm using, the Azure B2C that I have configured for the app, and you need to be authenticated to access the API. And you just turn it on through an app service setting. You can't do that right now. It's really limited, I guess, under its current implementation. So I can't just tell it use this Azure B2C instance, turn on like a self-registration flow.
Right.
That just isn't supported yet, but it turns out they're actually working on that. So that's one of the things
that will be transformative. Yeah, that will be transformative in it for adoption for this, because I can't see, especially with anybody with an existing identity store, being able to use an external authentication provider or to point it at an existing identity provider is going to be really important.
Yeah, so like I can turn it on for all Microsoft accounts and all Twitter accounts and all accounts and then invite users, but like that's not really a workflow that works for most applications. It works for some applications, but like for something I just want to put out there, let people register on their own and join the system, that's just not supported currently.
Right. But if you were a company that had your own Azure Active Directory already, could you use that? Like users are already in that Active Directory?
So the thing is, it's kind of all or not, like there's no way to select which Active Directory that it's using, from what I can tell, unless it's just tied to the one that this happens to be deployed to. But it just feels like it's not done. Like they're not done implementing that portion of it yet.
Possibly why it's just in preview.
I think that's a big portion of it, yes.
So when we get some updates on identity and how that works, then we'll definitely do another episode there, because I feel like this is going to be a really strong contender for a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is a common pattern for like most of the apps I build these days. It's a static front end or static assets for the front end built in some JavaScript framework, and then a set of functions on the back end. So if we can just have a better tie-in with identity, then we're golden.
And having the automatic crafting of environments and having a starting point for build scripts is really going to start to chip away at anybody who still has a predisposition against using some kind of automated DevOps or whatever. Like it makes it so easy to get going and up and running. So.
Sure. So what's under locks and what's under tasks?
Oh, I think those are
Locks is just a basic. That's like every Azure resource has that, doesn't it?
Okay.
And automation tasks. I'm not sure. I have not played in here. Oh.
Yeah, these are just common Azure things.
Gotcha. Okay, and then obviously the export template for if you needed to do the whole automation of the entire stack of resources that you have associated with this. So, yeah.
So this could, like right now, our monsters blog, I'm not even sure how that one works. I think we have a check on it, and in Azure DevOps, it builds it out for us, I think, to an app service still. So this could replace that whole build process.
It sure could.
Wholesale.
It could, yeah.
I was actually just thinking maybe we could do that as a live project one day.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I have I'm gonna need to get going. I have 120 sandwiches to make, so
Tech is powerful hungry.
Try not to eat them all at once.
I eat them all the time. Awesome.
Right. Well, thanks a lot for taking us through this, James. And for those of you out there in internet land, remember to like, comment, share, and let us know what your experiences are with the static web apps, because I'm interested to see where it goes.
Mash on that subscribe button. Mom and Dad definitely want to watch this show.
Right.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye.